Hello, I'm Megan Kelvinack.
And I'm Kate Newell.
And welcome back to our third episode of Library Lights. We're delighted to welcome you to our final episode of 2025. Today we're going to be talking about the gift of time. Before we dive in, should we take a step back in time and reflect on November? How do you feel it went?
Yeah, I was really busy, wasn't it? So last month we were talking about knowledge management, knowledge mobilisation, November with a K on the front, KNOWvember. So we were quite busy. We launched some new training videos. We obviously released a second episode of our podcast, and we refreshed our library website as well with lots of information about knowledge mobilisation. And we had a piece in our news as well talking about everything that the Knowledge Library Service does to support knowledge mobilisation in the organisation. So it was really busy. And now it's nearly Christmas. Time certainly flies. So thinking about Christmas shopping and gifts, what are you hoping to get for Christmas this year, Megan?
It might sound really sad, but I'm really looking forward to getting a hot pot grill combo. I'm a big fan of Chinese hot pots, but you don't really see them a lot in restaurants over here, and I really want to try cooking one. So I've kind of convinced my parents to get me a Chinese hot pot, so I'm very looking forward to that. What about you?
Excellent. I've asked for something quite sad, so I love to read kind of books and my Kindle. So I've requested a little stand that you can get. So when you're reading in bed, it's like a stand that you clip your Kindle to with a snack tray. I'm very excited about this. So yeah, that should be really good.
Amazing. So obviously today we're talking about the gift of time. So for our users, can you please explain what actually is the gift of time?
Yeah, certainly. So we thought the theme today, the gift of time, is more specifically about how your knowledge and library service can give you the gift of time. So we'll be joined today by Roxanne Hart, Knowledge and Evidence Specialist for Primary Care and the ICB, who's going to be telling us more about how her role provides the gift of time and bridges the gap between hospital and community. So to give you a bit more information about the gift of time, so this is a value proposition concept that NHS England have produced a statement about. So it's all about how knowledge and library services provide the gift of time and savings to organisations. We'll pop a link in the comments to the full report if you want to read the whole thing. So basically, our services help to give healthcare staff more time to spend caring for their patients while being confident that they have the most relevant evidence-based information they need to plan and deliver the care. We take the heavy lifting out of getting evidence into practice. So NHS England did some research on this and looked at other international research in terms of cost, in terms of time saving and efficiency. The return on investment for having a knowledge and library service in the NHS is that for every dollar invested has a return of $2.4. So if you tot all that up, that equates to a net economic benefit of £77 million a year. But what does that mean in terms of actual time saved for colleagues in Somerset?
So in terms of our own figures and facts, we've highlighted a few from our own service. So since April of this year, our KLS team have conducted 119 evidence searches. The average time to complete these is about 9.5 hours, which saves 184 working days. The example, for instance, a cardio nurse specialist, a search took 4 hours to complete, which if she had completed that is an afternoon's worth of clinical appointments that meant she could have seen about 28 patients. We've done 178 hours of inductions and training, which means that we're helping our colleagues find and effectively use health information resources, which basically just means they've got the evidence at their fingertips when they need it. Our lovely library assistants have sourced and sent out nearly 600 journal articles from other libraries, often within 24 hours, so that's getting you the evidence when and where it's needed. And over 300 of our colleagues have benefited from our current awareness bulletin service, KnowledgeShare, which delivered about 6,300 emails of high quality evidence and research directly to their inboxes. So as well as our bespoke bulletins, we create on research, long COVID, patient safety and mental health. We can also provide the gift of time for quiet and reflection in our wellbeing spaces. For example, people are coming into the libraries and completing puzzles. We recently launched the seed libraries, which have been quite popular. So every day we're trying our best to give our colleagues the gift of time to prioritise patient care, service planning and research. So as we like to say, libraries are for life, not just for Christmas. So now we're joined by one of our colleagues, Roxanne Hart. Hello, Roxanne.
Hello. Hi. So I am a knowledge and evidence specialist for primary care. And in terms of how I normally badge that when I explain it to people, I sort of say that I try to make it easy for people to find, access and apply evidence in primary care in the ICB. My role originally started from a pot of funding for what was NHS England, and there were originally about 17 of us dotted around England, sort of trialling out this idea of providing a knowledge and evidence service to primary care. And then at the end of the pilot, we were asked to find funding locally. And initially, we actually didn't for a few months, but then the Somerset Training Hub granted us another year of temporary funding as they'd seen the impact of the role and really wanted to get it going again for primary care. Also, people often want to know what my background is. So I have a master's degree in library and information studies. And since completing my master's, I've always worked in healthcare related information specialist roles. Apart from a brief stint at a fancy chocolate shop in Australia. But funnily enough, despite all my professional posts being healthcare related, I actually consider my background pretty varied. So I've worked as an academic librarian, which was nursing liaison librarian at Queen's University, that being the one in Canada, not the one in Belfast. I've worked at hospitals and NHS trusts, and my first ever post after completing my master's was interning with someone who was the systematic review searching expert in Canada. Shout out to Margaret Sampson. And then skipping forward a few years, my recent posts have been as the Quality Improvement Knowledge and Evidence Specialist at Musgrove. And this role actually came second place for an HSJ award. And then during the emergency phase of the pandemic, I was seconded to the NHS England and Improvement COVID-19 Behavioural Change Unit alongside my wonderful colleague Jessica Polly. And then my substantive role is as a knowledge and evidence specialist at Somerset Foundation Trust, but I hope to make my substantive role knowledge and evidence specialist for primary care. It's okay, guys, my manager agrees. So we're looking for ways to fund this.
Yeah, Jess mentioned the secondment that you both had to NHSE last month when she was on the podcast.
It's wonderful.
It was good. So obviously you say that you want this role to be your substantive one, but why is that and why do you think it's needed?
Yeah, so many reasons. I guess let's start with why it's needed. So for one thing, upwards of 90% of patient contact happens in primary care currently. So, why is this kind of a two-tier service with secondary care receiving a proper knowledge and library service while primary care is asked to make do with an NHS admin's account and thoughts and prayers? And I say that because it's a bit of a bugbear of mine to give someone access to some online journals and resources and sort of call it a day, because just like books alone don't make a library, access alone, access to resources, does not make one evidence-based if there's no one there to show them how, and in some cases why to use evidence. And then in terms of why to use evidence, apologies, I do try to limit the time I spend preaching to the converted, but evidence-based decision-making enhances care quality, using resources efficiently reduces costs, and something else I like to highlight is that it can kind of complement or round out data. So an example of that is from a search I did recently for a GP practice. Their data was showing that they had good patient access, but actually their patients were reporting the opposite. And so the evidence base from research revealed that this is a pattern seen nationally where despite record numbers of appointments being delivered in general practice, patients are still unhappy and having difficulty with access. So my evidence briefing discussed a number of factors like how people decide what to do about symptoms, their knowledge of health services, what barriers they face, remote versus in person, and also which health professional they see. And all of this is even more relevant in light of the expected 3 shifts. So with more care shifting from the hospital to the community and an increased focus on prevention, there will be lots of changes in the way things are organised and work in primary care. And I sort of always say to people that if there's a change happening, to think of me as a perfect partner. So, and I hope this analogy resonates with people, but anytime we're making a change and trying something new, there is this sort of element of the unknown. You're taking a leap of faith. But what I say to people is that by using evidence, you aren't taking a leap of faith so much as a little hop. So the reason being that we've pulled together the best available evidence on your topic. We've synthesized it together. In some cases, I've contacted someone else who has already tried the thing you plan to do and asked them about it, or they've offered to have a call with you. Someone who previously used my evidence search service actually described it as a way to avoid a costly try it and see approach, which I really loved.
I like that. Yeah. That's a really good analogy. So obviously you've given us briefly one example about the search you did for the GP practice, but do you have any sort of like other examples that you could go into more detail about?
Yeah, definitely. So another interesting one relates to a search that I did over a year ago for a GP practice, who they had basically observed that at their practice, B12 injections were taking up a lot of appointments. And their observation was actually reflected in the evidence, which is that the main costs of B12 injections are actually staff related in terms of the time taken for the administration of the injection itself. So he was basically thinking, well, what if we teach patients to self-inject? And he wanted to know, is this a crazy idea? Is this being done in any other GP surgeries in the UK? So what did I find out? Basically, during April 2020, the RCGP had advised to consider teaching patients to self-inject if that was appropriate. And it looks like about 3 surgeries that we know of began this activity and continued it. So I gave the requester context about why and when the activity started, details about how the surgeries who are doing this activity tend to run it, along with an offer to facilitate and set up a call to learn through speaking with them. Also, I gave some details about issues with patients sourcing their injections from online sellers, which the reason I included that is it turned out in a survey of 1,300 patients, about 40% were doing this. So I thought it was worthwhile making the GP practice aware of that. And then finally, I included some other potential solutions, such as an alternative way to deliver a B12 injection clinic if they didn't decide to go down the self-injection route. That a GP consortium in Sheffield is doing. And then afterwards, with a kind of view of sharing and spreading past work, I ended up circulating this evidence search on a LMC bulletin for general practice. And I was then contacted by another GP who wanted to try putting this into place. And then last month, I was at a GP event and I was approached by her colleague who had asked her to let me know that they've actually made this change, and so far it's saved 27 hours of nursing time, and they've converted 10% of their patients to self-injection, and they plan to do more as they have appointments come up with these B12 patients. And so one of the exciting things about my service that I find exciting is that I feel like I make it possible to take an idea that someone might have been mulling over at work for a while and move it that one step closer to reality. So another example, I recently completed an evidence search for a GP who was seeing increasing amounts of patients coming in who suspect that they have conditions called MCAS, MCAS, or hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And so because they are complex conditions and previously thought to be rare conditions, she's basically identified a knowledge gap at her practice and wants to create an educational intervention for staff at her practice. And so by the time she'd met me, she'd been thinking about this problem for a while. And so what I did was I took the time-intensive step of an evidence search off her to-do list. And I looked at the available evidence. I found the best pieces suited to her role. So, for example, what would a primary care doctor need to know versus the kind of evidence that I would provide to an MCAS specialist? Totally different levels of detail. And if I wasn't there, would the search have still happened? Yes, she's a dedicated, clever person. But in all likelihood, she would have done it in her personal time, and she already works enough in her personal time. And I don't think that's the way the NHS should be run. And also I don't know why this is sort of hard for me to say, but I also like to think that as an evidence specialist, I have particular skills and expertise in the searching area. So, another example, later today I have a meeting with a clinical pharmacist who's in the scoping phase of a relaunch of their pain clinics. He has contacted me because he wants to use an evidence-based approach for these clinics. Specifically, he's mentioned the demedicalized approach of skills, not pills. So I'm really excited to be partnering with them in terms of supplying the evidence that's going to be underpinning these new clinics. I can keep going. Should I?
That's all right. So I think they're really interesting, and I really like the way that our users are more than capable of obviously doing an evidence search, but having us in place just saves them that time so they can focus on, getting the evidence and turning it into evidence-based practice rather than, and especially having to work in your personal time, especially in the run up to Christmas, everyone is busy enough. But do you have any other goals for your service?
Yes, and also, before I go into that, it has just reminded me about something else, what you've said, which is that something that has always been a goal of mine is to have consulting evidence be part of the DNA of primary care in Somerset. So, so to hear from one of my users that's the case at one PCN, it feels like a win. And basically what she had said to me is that I have enabled evidence use to become a norm and less frightening at their in their PCN. So yeah, that feels like a real win. And then other goals, one of the main ones, and one that I kind of touched on at the start, and also the theme of this podcast, is saving people time. So general practice is so dedicated and honestly so busy. So, delivering my service in the most time-saving manner is an absolute essential.
So obviously we are talking about saving time and, giving our users that gift of time back. So how, what is the main way in which you do that?
I mean, probably the most obvious way is the way that I organise the evidence searches I produce, and also the lengths that we go to get an answer. And actually we've had pushback on that, to do it faster, to not go into as much detail. And my response is that if the answer is easy to find, they would have done it themselves in 5 minutes on Google. People approach us to find the evidence and research on topics that are hard to find evidence and research on. And the work is important to them. It impacts on patients, either directly or indirectly. So it's just as important to me, and important to get it right. And that does take time. So when I create an evidence search to save people time, I do two things. One is a bit of a synthesis at the start. And this is sort of to give the reader an overview of what the evidence landscape has revealed and shown for their topic. And also to kind of guide them through the sources. And then for individual sources, I'll kind of break that down, and I'll do a one or couple sentence summary to help you decide which papers to read in full text. And then for each individual source, I'll try to pull out relevant sections to highlight these to you. And this will typically be where I'll pull out the bits that most directly answer your question. But of course, this will also depend on the person I've done the search for. So are they a high level information only person? So do they just want the high level detail only, or do they want all the details? And how I kind of structure an evidence search will also depend on the information itself. So how did it come together? What patterns emerged when I gathered it and read it? And so sometimes I might pop things into a table to display it more clearly, just as an example. And then at the start, I kind of cryptically said, in terms of I say that sometimes we go to great lengths. And so to just explain what I meant by that, it's not unusual for me to message people on X, Twitter, I hate calling it X, or LinkedIn, or figure out their email addresses if I found a little snippet of something online and I suspect they have trialed something they were thinking of trialing. And people find this aspect of the service really unexpected and helpful. And I think it's kind of one place where the knowledge management aspect of the role really picks up, because maybe the evidence-based has dropped off. So maybe the evidence base isn't there yet. Maybe we're too at the cutting edge of something. So connecting people up is a great way to learn from others when maybe no one has put pen to paper and written their work up. So this is a great way to take advantage of all that valuable knowledge walking around in people's heads.
So obviously I like to think, and we might be biased because we are librarians, that we do have a great service, and especially with you being embedded in primary care. Yeah. But obviously with you being embedded in primary care, who is eligible to use your service?
Yeah. Easy question. Anyone working in primary care in Somerset, and also staff of the ICB.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming onto the podcast today, Roxanne. It was lovely to have you on. And we will now go back to Kate.
Thanks, McGann. I'm back to my regular slot now, where it feels like a bit of a regular slot, talking about the resource of the month. So today we're talking about KnowledgeShare. So we mentioned it slightly earlier on in the podcast as one of our services that saves colleagues time. So KnowledgeShare is basically a resource which you can sign up for, which creates current awareness alerts on the latest top quality articles, research and evidence on whatever your professional area of interest is, and it's delivered straight to your inbox. So it's a great way to keep yourself up to date effortlessly.
So just so our users know, how does it work?
All you need to do is to complete a quick registration form. We'll pop the links in the comments, and tell us what you're interested in and how often you'd like the email alerts, so they can be daily, weekly, every 2 weeks or monthly. We set up a profile for you and we set up the alerts. It looks like they'll come from me, but that's not actually me. It's generated by the system to save me time.
So if someone has more than one area of interest, can they sign up?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can set up more than one topic alert for your profile. And we can also set up table of contents alerts as well for particular journals. If there's particular journals that you're interested in, just ask the team.
Perfect. So for people that might no longer want to receive alerts or their interests have changed, is there a way that they can reach out to us to let us know?
Yeah, it's really easy. So all you need to do is just reach out, contact the library team, and we can sort all that out for you. So, as we know, Christmas is coming, the evenings are getting darker, it's a perfect time to curl up with a cosy read. So, McGann, what are you reading at the moment?
So, this month for our reading corner, I'm actually suggesting a festive read that captures both the magic and sometimes the mess and chaos of Christmas. So, Laura Barnett's book called Gifts. This book explores how wonderful, sad, difficult and happy the holiday season can be. This book follows a loop of 12 people. So it starts with Maddie, who runs a bookshop on Market Square, looking to buy a present for an old school friend, Peter. Meanwhile, Peter, who's just moved back to London after a messy divorce, is looking to buy a gift for his daughter, Chloe. And then meanwhile, Chloe's looking to buy a gift for her grandmother. So it goes full circle. And I read this book last year, and it's just a really heartwarming story that combines all the best bits of the festive seasons with our loved ones, and I quite like how it's done after the 12 days of Christmas. So I very much enjoyed this book. So if you are looking for a short festive read, that is one that I would suggest.
That sounds perfect. Thank you for the recommendation. I think I'll add it to my TBR list to perhaps use on my Kindle, on my new Kindle stand that I'm hopefully getting for Christmas.
You'll have to let me know how that goes. I might need to request one next year. So now I'm going to pass back to you, Kate. So now we're moving on to our research spotlight, and I think this month we're celebrating some local research, aren't we?
We are. So if you fancy reading, as well as the lovely cosy read that we've just recommended, some research that's been done locally, our Associate Medical Director for Research, Jo Morrison, who's a huge champion of our library service, hello Jo if you're listening, has co-authored 2 Cochrane systematic reviews looking at the evidence for HPV vaccination from randomised clinical trials and population studies. So these reviews provide compelling evidence for safety and efficacy of this health intervention, which is contributing to the shift from illness to prevention in healthcare. You'll find details of these articles in our institutional repository, Inspire, and we'll pop the links in the comments. So this episode, we've been exploring the gift of time, and we wanted to take the opportunity to highlight the opportunity for people to give the gift of time and contribute to national research by signposting to a website called Be Part of Research. And thank you, Roxanne, for signposting this to us. So if you or your family member has a health condition and you'd like to contribute to research which might provide new solutions or treatments, simply sign up on the Be Part of Research website to be alerted to studies happening locally that you could participate in if you wanted to. It's a great way to contribute to scientific and medical progress and can be as minimally invasive as a survey. So if you're feeling a bit intimidated by it, so for example, I'm part of the Exeter 10,000 project, which is quite similar to the Be Part of Research project. And I'm signed up to it, and I'm alerted to when new research studies are happening in areas that I feel that I can contribute to. I've done a few surveys, done a few kind of blood tests and things. It's easy and it's a great way to give back.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Kate. I always like the research spotlight because there's always a lot of interesting things happening around the trust, and it's always good to hear, local research that's happening in our organisation. So today for our frequently asked questions segment, I'm going to briefly just talk about how you can request an evidence search. So if you would like us to perform an evidence search for you, so we can give you the gift of time. All you need to do is fill in our evidence search request form, which you can find on the website, and I will link it below. And if you have a spare couple of minutes, we are holding our annual KLS survey, so maybe you could give us a little gift of your time. I will pop the link for the survey in the description below. So thank you very much for listening to our December episode. We wish all our colleagues a wonderful festive season. Merry Christmas!